This video was created to look at some of the different tactics used within the animal advocacy movement. We will look at some of the assumptions different tactics make and specifically examine where different tactics place power in the hands of people or institutions. The animal advocacy movement consists of all individuals working to improve conditions for animals. The movement is large and has many different factions. Historically, the greatest division between the movement has been described as the animal welfare and animal rights divide. Whereas animal welfare has proposed that it is morally acceptable to use animals as long as they are not caused unnecessary harm, animal rights state that it is never morally acceptable for humans to use or exploit animals. More recently, people are recognizing a new division within our movement. We have chosen to describe this difference as between those who use a non-confrontational approach and those who use a confrontational approach. We will first describe what we mean by a non-confrontational approach. The base assumptions of this approach can be described as follows. The capitalist economic, political, and legal structures are considered valid and/or acceptable. Activist goals can be achieved by working with the state and corporations. Animal suffering can be reduced by changing the institutions that harm animals, but the approach does not directly challenge the legitimacy of these institutions. A belief that representational democracy is a good or acceptable method for ensuring people's voices are heard. So while governments and institutions are asked to change, the power to change rests within these institutions. The methods and message tend to be single issue. Because of these assumptions, strictly legal tactics that are considered acceptable modes of change by the state are used. This approach stands in opposition to what we call a confrontational approach. The base assumptions of this approach can be summarized as follows. A belief that the capitalist system is inherently harmful and that the state has become a tool of corporate interests. Activist goals cannot be realized by working within the corrupt state system. Challenges the idea that representative democracy is legitimate. Power is put in the hands of the people rather than corporations or governments by directly confronting animal exploiters and the institutions that support them. Recognizes that all oppressions have common root causes and build connections between human, animal, and earth liberation movements. The tactics used are not sanctioned by the state. Though the tactics may be legal or illegal, they are not viewed as acceptable modes of social change and are generally met with state repression. To gain a better look at these different approaches, we will now look more specifically at some of the social change tactics these two groups use. We will look first at education. An example of non-confrontational education would be traditional vegan outreach. In traditional vegan outreach, people are asked to stop buying products that exploit animals. They are usually told that they can do so easily by buying a multitude of vegan specialty products, suggesting that we need to give our money to good, rather than bad, corporations. So while the approach does challenge the idea that eating meat is acceptable, it does not challenge the capitalist system that supports and worsens animal exploitation. By telling people that instead of buying meat, we should buy certain brands of vegan specialty products, we acknowledge that capitalism is an acceptable system if only we all stopped eating meat. Alternatively, a confrontational form of education would acknowledge that veganism is an important ethical choice, but we would not suggest that simply buying from vegan corporations will give us the world we want. Confrontational education would be clear that the corporate state depends on the exploitation of humans, animals, and the earth, and that we should act in ways that challenge the system. Another example of confrontational education would be to advocate for both legal and illegal direct action or more confrontational tactics. We will now look at how these two groups may take action against institutions such as corporations or governments. Examples of non-confrontational institutional change would involve petitioning and lobbying government or corporations to change or improve their practices. This method has been used to implement changes such as larger cages, improved methods of slaughter, or selling vegan products. In Canada, activists have additionally introduced a bill to stop the seal slaughter. While these methods can be used to help animals, the main criticism with this method is that it does not challenge the legitimacy of the institution. Corporations and governments hold a great deal of power in our society, and so must be convinced the change will be beneficial to them, in terms of profits, votes, or some other incentive. While people can pressure for change, the power to change still rests with the institution. There is always a limit of what can be asked. No corporation or government will implement a change that will ultimately result in their collapse. In contrast, confrontational institutional change involves taking direct action. By direct action, we mean taking social change into your own hands by intervening directly in a situation rather than appealing to an external agent, such as a government. Examples include engaging in a campaign to close a store, slaughterhouse, or company which exploits animals, such as the Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty campaign. Directly liberating animals and property destruction, such as the actions done by the Animal Liberation Front, would also fall in this category. These activists do what they feel is right and do not wait for the institutions to change. While the action may be legal or illegal, the message is, stop this cruelty or we will stop it ourselves. Because this method does not use legitimate state channels, it is met with state repression. As part of the animal liberation movement, we use confrontational tactics. We do not use tactics that legitimize a corrupt state government and capitalist system that harms humans, animals, and the earth. We are in solidarity with those activists who work within the system to change the way animals are treated. These activists do not compromise on the idea that all animals should be free. But we choose tactics that put power directly into the people's hands. This is the only way we will be able to restructure our world into a society where everyone is free. Our education is anti-capitalist and anti-state, and our actions directly confront the institutions that harm animals. We confront exploitation industries in the state because the animals need us to. For further reading, we suggest the following resources.